most important aspect of infinite banking is certainty. It's control. It's efficiency. It's liquidity. Those are the four components that we emphasize so much in what we teach.
Once we know the rules of the game, we then are brought to the precipice of this reality of, do I want to be in the game that someone else created? Or do I want to begin to play the game where I know I'll win, then I play the way I want to?
So those types of conversations, internal rate of return, the fees, the interest rate, all that sort of thing, those are the types of questions and conversations we have in the mainstream paradigm of, well, what kind of return are you getting on your measly little savings?
Welcome to the Cashflow Legendz podcast with your hosts, Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
Welcome back to Cashflow Legendz. I am stoked, as I know Nate is, to be here with one of our dear friends, one of our OG ULC members / clients, and somebody who has had a tremendous impact on Nate and I's life individually in our business with his thought processes. Before we dive into this awesome conversation with Chris Wheatley, we also refer to him affectionately as C-Dub. We really want to always emphasize that we are so grateful that people take the time to visit with us by giving us their 30 minutes to an hour of the day to listen on all the platforms out there that are available. And we always appreciate any feedback, any comments, any interaction. It just helps us grow and share this message that we believe in passionately, and we're excited to kind of hear how that's played a role in our guests today in his life and our life. So, Chris, we will refer to you as C-Dub moving forward because that's just how we know you. We are stoked to have you here, and I'd also love to hear a little bit about you so everybody can know who you are, why you're here, what your heart is, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm really thrilled to be here, so thank you for the opportunity. Long time listener, first time guest. So it's glad to get the invite. So Chris Wheatley, call me C-Dub, call me Wheatley. Just don't call me late for dinner. My background is kind of varied, probably somewhat unique, I guess, for most clients. I have a degree in theater and film from the University of Kansas. I worked in that industry for about 6 years or so, doing independent films and television and theater and that sort of thing. Basically worked in it long enough to know that I had no interest in actually having a career in Hollywood. But got me out to California. I met my wife out there and decided to go back to school for engineering. So I also have a renewable energy engineering degree, which is more or less an electrical engineering degree with some mechanical engineering thrown in and technology specific courses and that sort of thing. So since graduation, I've been working the last 8 years almost in the energy industry. So as an energy engineer, essentially going into really large commercial buildings and helping clients find ways to save energy. That part of my career also had me, pulled into the software world quite a bit. And so for the last 6 months, I have been more on the IT side as the director of IS for a company called Michael's Energy. That's been a little bit of my career. As far as the blessing of meeting the two of you, I think that started, I was thinking about this last night. I believe I watched Nate's pinned Twitter video in 2019. It was like right as this whole like COVID thing was about to happen, and was living in Oregon at the time. I was furloughed from my job, was looking for other opportunities for alternative ways to make money or to manage my finances, just trying to learn. It felt like there was more there that I was ignorant to. And so stumbled across Nate's video, was really intrigued, took the course, became obsessed with IBC. And that's kind of how I ended up here. That's the short version.
One of the blessings and privileges that we have had over the years is being able to connect with so many people from so many different backgrounds and perspectives and everything like that. And one of the things I can flash back to our early conversations, one of the things I love so much about you and your brain and your thought process is you were challenging me in the way that I was teaching. It caused me to be sharper in the way I was educating others and everything like that. And it's one of the things that I can appreciate from you. I would love to know from your engineering brain, where was the light bulb moment where everything started to come together for you when it comes to the infinite banking concept?
Gosh, that's a great question. You know, the pinned video, to be honest, the pinned tweet, the pinned video, the comparison of, you know, cash versus finance for vehicle savings and the very simple illustration, you know, and always coming back to zero is what caught my attention first. And I think the reason is that, you know, so often we take for granted what's so, and we get locked into these patterns of thinking and we don't even reevaluate. Yeah, you know, if you want to do the Dave Ramsey thing, which I think I've got a Dave Ramsey book probably on my shelf behind me, you know, you pay cash and that's it. And there's no sort of permission to shut your brain down, if you will. That first video where the graph just keeps going up because you don't have to come back to zero. I can remember sitting on my couch when we were in Oregon going, well, is that true? And if so, that's interesting. I mean, I was a little bit, certainly, I wouldn't say hesitant, but guarded. You know, always kind of guarded with this topic, I guess. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And so, yeah, I think that pinned video is really what triggered it for me first. And then going through the course, reading the book, and then just iterating on what was possible, just being in an Excel spreadsheet for 2 hours after I read the book at like 1 a.m. going, this can't be possible. Well, the math checks out, but it can't be possible. It goes against everything I've ever been taught about finance. So of course it can't be real. And coming back to one of, you know, Nelson's principles of rethinking my thinking, I think is one of the most powerful aspects of the infinite banking concept, aside from the mechanics of life insurance and what's possible by, you know, taking over the banking function at the you and me level. Just the idea that there's an idea here to unpack that is totally new and different to any way I had ever thought about finance. And that is, I love learning. As you guys know, I love learning new things. I love challenging my brain. And typically when I hear something, whether it's online or in print, the first question that I ask in my head is that true? And that's become a more common response over the last few years since meeting the two of you. Is not taking for granted what I already think to be so, but really asking the question and going another layer deeper to investigate for myself.
We've had this conversation many times, and I'm going to touch on something Nate said to frame his question. When Nate and I began our company, and just really ignorance on fire that we knew what we were doing and believed in it, but we had no real approach. We were just like, let's get this out there to anybody that's willing to learn this. And Nate's pinned tweet, interestingly enough, was also the thing that helped my wife, Leah, get a ton of clarity on, okay, this makes sense. What I love about that is it's simple. So if you've not seen Nate's pinned tweet and you're just coming to this, go find it on X, once Twitter, now X. We'll put it in the show notes also. It doesn't overcomplicate it, because a lot of times the truest things are simple. And often if they're not simple, we have to really ask, why are they not simple? And that is relevant in any area of life, I'm learning. So a lot of times when we have new people come to us and they go through a process, they've read Becoming Your Own Banker, the engineer type brain often struggles with this. And we always say you are our unicorn because you have an engineer brain and you went all the way down the rabbit hole of the numbers and you came back out to the surface and you go, I don't ever have to go there again because this is just like gravity. I don't have to jump out of a window to prove gravity. Okay, it's there. It's for sure. But we send people your way often to just have that conversation, because I thought I was a numbers guy, C-Dub, until I met you. And now I have no desire to be a numbers guy at the level that C-Dub is. But why don't you touch on that a little bit from the perspective of if somebody is listening to this for the first time or read Becoming Your Own Banker and they have that engineer brain, and how you kind of walk through that process?
You know, I think for me, it was an interest in the kind of the mechanics of it. You know, during at least a V1 of the course before 2.0, there was the kind of walking through some of the mechanical aspects of it, how it works. I think it's really easy to get caught up in needing to prove the math and it being like, well, there's this little window of possibility where if, you know, number A is larger than number B, then this is legit. If number A is smaller than number B, then it's a scam. There's something like hidden in the math. And so, you know, the arithmetic of it is quite simple. And I think that's one of the things that's powerful. So it was very easy to prove to myself from a, you know, a spreadsheet standpoint that the concept, that the idea of the infinite banking concept works mathematically. And so I kind of got over that first hump, and then was really obsessed with the mechanics of how it worked. And every time I tried to talk to a friend or a family member about the infinite banking concept, it always came down to, look what you can do with it. Look what's powerful about the numbers. And what I have realized over time is that that's seemingly a very sophisticated or complex way of looking at it as an appropriate approach. And what I've realized over time is that it's so much more about the principles that Nelson was trying to teach, and the simplicity of it, and the human behavior problems, for me personally, is what is incredibly powerful about IBC. Not so much getting creative with life insurance. There's lots of, as y'all know, there's lots of folks out there who can get pretty darn creative with life insurance, but that's not in my view, that is not the infinite banking concept. It's always coming back to Nelson's principles, and just kind of seeing how that's applicable in my own life, in, amongst my friends, my family, my community, that sort of thing. So was there a particular moment that made that shift for me? It's hard to remember something specifically, but one of the things I come back to as an example is, I do remember the moment when, I used to track every little dollar that came through my system in a spreadsheet, as an example. I'm taking over this part of my student loans. I need to, finance a medical surgery, or, dentist work, or, something else in my life, and would track every dollar in payment and really get it down to the line item. And over time, I've kind of moved away from that, and it's much more general. And I remember looking at my spreadsheet, and the amount that I owed to myself was greater than my outstanding loan balance to my policies. And for whatever reason, that was an incredibly powerful moment to me, because I realized, like, oh, I'm in charge. Like, I'm the banker, and I may owe myself $10,000, but my outstanding loan balance to the insurance company is only $5,000. What does that really mean? How powerful is that? How does that put me in the driver's seat? And so, I think that's really what it's been about for me, in terms of moving away from the numbers. And, it's not like I've become disinterested in the mechanics of life insurance, or how cool it can be, or what you can do with, the various components and structures of a policy or set of policies. But it's getting very clear that it is the principles that Nelson was trying to teach that are the most powerful thing by far, because they are exposing the human problem, and it is the most clear and simple way of implementing, as many folks have said. So this is not new from me or anything like that, but IBC is Austrian economics in practice, and getting deeper into the education and deeper into the fundamentals of what Nelson was trying to teach has been more illuminating for me than any spreadsheet has ever been.
One of the things that I think about when it comes to the numbers, there's a lot of people out there marketing the infinite banking concept as this idea of, there's arbitrage, where you can earn at a greater rate than what you're being charged and all that stuff. And where some of that can be true, as you were saying, the most important aspect of infinite banking is certainty. It's control. It's efficiency. It's liquidity. Those are the four components that we emphasize so much in what we teach. When you think about the traditional financial world and you compare it to what we are doing, most people, I'm saying most, not everybody, but most people, I would imagine, when they walk in their financial advisor's office, they are off-putting the responsibility to the advisor at that point to grow their money. And they're probably not asking a lot of questions about how that's being done. And they're probably not challenging the financial advisor in how that is being done. When they're spitting out pieces of paper that talk about rates of return, they're not running the numbers. They're not doing the math on that to even see if they can prove out that to be true. And it's funny, because when we get into this world of what we do, we don't take that same approach when it comes to the traditional financial world. So many of the people that we connect with, like you said, they want to see it proven out and everything like that. And when you start to understand that it's really more conceptual than it is about the math, that creates some cognitive dissonance in the world, because most people are on autopilot. They have not been asked the important questions that they need to be asked when it comes to what they are doing. They're on autopilot because maybe they're really good at their job or something like that. And they're going to let somebody else be good at growing their wealth, making the money, and everything like that. And certainty, control, liquidity, and efficiency, those things are not going to show up in our life until we start to take responsibility for our own self, our own money.
I think it's a brilliant point, Nate. And I think the last thing you said is responsibility. And that's something I think about a lot. I've had a couple of conversations about IBC and even, listened, I can't remember whose podcast it was, but someone mentioned something to the effect of like, well, if you're a set it and forget it person, we're probably not a good fit. I think that makes some sense. I think for me, what I always come down to is that responsibility piece. You don't have to know how to do everything. I think folks can get intimidated by, wait a second, you mean I have to be my own banker? I have to think about transactions and, debits and credits, and I have to become an expert in banking. And I would shift that slightly and say, well, you certainly need to educate yourself, both in the concept and in the foundational principles that helped birth it, if you will. But it's more about taking responsibility for your future and for your family's future. It doesn't mean you have to know everything or do everything yourself, but that personal responsibility is so key to having success. I would say, with IBC.
With those thought processes you guys have both brought up that are really bringing to light. And I always try to remember what Winnie Lau said years and years and years ago when we started. Anytime we put any information out, I want to always come from a place as if somebody's listening to this the first time or having a conversation the first time. Because me, you, and Nate can go in depth because this is what we do every day. This is what we live. We have taken ownership, which is freeing. Okay, so the first question that I wish I would have known years ago, C-Dub, if you were to have dawned our doorstep again and you're asking all these phenomenal questions, and I had known already that you saw the cash versus finance example, I would have asked you this simple question because I remember you making me very uncomfortable with your very engineer type questions because you were at a level I couldn't get to and never will I be able to. And that's okay. I would have asked you, hey, Chris, if you had more uses of your dollar, or if $1 could do 3 things, 4 things, 5 things guaranteed, would that be better than what you are doing right now? And that is not a guess. That is not, I think that's possible. That is, I know without a shadow of a doubt, just as certain as I know that if I jump out of a 30-foot high window, I'm going to have damage that is caused to my body because of gravity. I don't have to prove that. I know that. So then when I think about those conversations and I think about what Nate just said about most of us are on autopilot, I think we got to go a level deeper. Why? And here's a question that I want you to think about, C-Dub, and come at from what you know now. Do you think it's possible that the system we are in, created by banks, Wall Street, and IRS, and financial institutions most of the time, have created a system to where we have opted into failure subconsciously or unconsciously? That the system is created and that we are giving people an opportunity to opt out of financial failure and having to make that choice. How do you think, if I would have asked you that question when we met, hey, C-Dub, do you want to have the opportunity to opt out of financial failure?
That's an easy yes. I would say anyone who says no, I don't want to opt out of financial failure is not thinking, for one. And what it makes me think about is the difference between the seen and the unseen.
I already wrote that down. How cool is that?
I know. And I know y'all have talked about it a lot on this podcast, and we've had conversations on the side. And of course, Nelson talked about it a lot. And I think that's another aspect of this, is that especially for the engineering types, the detail-oriented folks concerned with rate of return or the arbitrage or whatever it is, it's a hyper focus on the seen, forgetting that there is value in the unseen. And that's really hard to quantify. In fact, it's almost impossible to quantify. You can't quantify peace of mind, as an example. I know that y'all have talked about that before. I'm just kind of showing my fanboy status here, but I think that's a huge aspect of it, because that's another area that I was very blind to in the early portion. I was really focused on the scene, really focused on the comparison of various opportunities, as opposed to really sitting with and really exploring all of the unseen advantages, taking responsibility for the banking function at the UME level.
So we're talking about Austrian economics. It reminds me, we're talking about seen and unseen. So here's something that's unseen by many people. Back in, well, before Nixon took us off the gold standard, when our dollars were actually backed by something. So a silver dollar, which was 1 ounce of silver, a silver dollar used to represent a paper dollar, which was called a silver certificate at the time. You could hold on to your silver dollar, or you could exchange it for a silver certificate that represented the dollar. We fast forward to today, and I don't know what the spot price of silver is right now. It's probably somewhere hovering between $35 and $40 an ounce, which means now it takes $40 bills to equal that silver dollar. What that means to me is that our money is losing energy. When we're talking about infinite banking specifically, what problem does it solve for? It gives our money energy. It gives our money strength. We are able to fight against this inevitable, inflation is inevitable. Let me just say that. On the current system that we're on, inflation will not stop.
It's man-made.
Because our politicians will not stop it. The ones who are closest to the money printer, those are the ones you have to pay attention to. When we see what's happening right now, our dollar's losing value, losing energy, that means that we have less ability to do what we could have done previously. If you only knew what you were actually capable of right now, it would blow your mind, because we've got inflation, we've got taxes, we have all these forces that are working against us, and then we only get to see what's left over from that. And if we were ever able to get to a place where energy is restored in our money, our country would absolutely explode.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And when getting into a conversation around, the monetary system or Austrian economics or IBC, one of the first questions that I ask people is, well, what's money? And usually the response is something to the effect of, well, what's the thing? I buy stuff with it. What is money? Oh, well, it's a medium of exchange. Sure, but what does it represent? And trying to get folks to that thought, that idea of money being a concentration of time and energy. It's a store of your own time and energy that then you can use to exchange for other stuff. That's an element of the unseen. The seen is the silver dollar, right? Or the dollar bill, or the number in your checking account. The unseen is what it represents as this sort of the store of value of your own time and energy. I think if we can get some clarity around that for a lot of people, they'll start to see the connection between the sort of diffusing of the energy, this kind of spreading it out and losing momentum and losing energy in our money as well. So I think it's an awesome point.
Well, when you factor in inflation and the increase in the money supply to the appreciation of assets over time, it's not telling the full story. Like with the silver example that I gave earlier, most people just think, oh, the value of silver has gone up. No, it's the value of the dollar has gone down. You can look at the housing market, you can look at the stock market,
you can look at groceries.
Yeah, but all these different rates of return, these numbers that we see on a chart and everything like that, rarely, if ever, is inflation factored into the equation. Whatever rate of return somebody tells you, or whatever appreciation you see on a chart, if inflation, the increase in the money supply, is not factored into that equation, it's not telling the story.
100%. Or taxes, or the fees that are associated with, that particular vehicle. There's so much that's not included in the marketing demonstration of a particular app.
Let's get people really thinking real quick on this conversation. And we're going to go right back to Nelson and becoming your own banker. I'm not even going to reference in depth where I'm going with this yet. But if I were to pose this question out loud anywhere, standing on a corner, in a financial advisor's office, on stage with thousands of people listening to me talk about money, or any of us, and I said, what if I could with certainty show you how to keep or get 34.5% rate of return on every dollar that you have coming into your life right now? It would create chaos, or the most impactful cognitive dissonance experience right then about money. Because what Nelson realized when he talks about the human problem, when he talks about the fact that the system has been created to segment you from your energy, from your wealth, that's what he was saying, is that we don't even realize that if we can just understand what's really going on, we can begin to take back control of money that is already ours, that the system is created to take away from us. And you can see this in every area of how dollars flow through our life. Let me give you a great simple example tied to energy. Go down the rabbit hole of how electrical companies work and realize very quickly that it is set up to not ever let you benefit other than daily from the electrical process of sharing energy, or the energy process of sharing electricity. How do I know that? Because I know what they will pay me to buy back my energy compared to what I pay them. That is a part of the game. Now, what I love about it also, and I've always loved this connection, C-Dub, for you and your heart for Nelson's message, is Nelson actually uses the electrical grid to teach how your money can get and gain and never lose energy on it, by saying, if you wanted to create electrical grid, you wouldn't go build your own because of all the energy and resources and time and effort and lack of knowledge. You would tap into one that's already established, which is a mutual insurance company for our dollars. So touch on that from your electrical engineering brain. Y'all got me fired up. Touch on that from your electrical engineering brain on how you see that, and bring it to the masses of anybody's listening to simplify it in a way that really makes sense.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of important things. So one, there's the Nelson uses the analogy of a grocery store, and there's a number of reasons why he selected that particular analogy, which we don't need to go into. But the point that he was trying to make is that you are essentially starting a business, and let's think about all the components that would go into starting a business in terms of time and investment and that sort of thing. I think that's part of it. The other piece, when you mention energy, is like there are losses associated between the generation facility and by the time it gets to your iPhone out of the charger. There's this entire process that is behind the scenes, the unseen, that helps to explain some of the costs associated with delivering energy to a house, or facilitating the use of an insurance policy or a contract that is administered by a mutual company. As far as the simplicity of it goes, you mentioned energy and kind of what Nelson was trying to teach, and taking advantage of the existing infrastructure. As you have heard, and as your listeners will hear as they continue to educate themselves within the kind of infinite banking footprint, is that there are a lot of people out there who have claimed to make Nelson's work better, to improve upon it. Oh, well, you just need to add this little thing here and this little extra rider and do this, that, and the other, and set up these policies and shrink down the base, and then take a max policy loan, and then sign up for your mailbox money. And it's just as simple as that. When in reality, they're almost overcomplicating it, and it really is incredibly simple. And the sooner you can get to a place where you're comfortable with that simplicity, the easier it is to understand the infinite banking concept. As far as the energy analogy and taking advantage of existing infrastructure, there are lots of ways that you could implement the infinite banking concept. It just happens to be that using whole life, participating whole life insurance from a mutual company, from a dividend paying company, is the best way to go about it. And so, there's no need to add all of this fluff and complexity to it. The structure exists. You just have to use it. Lean into the unseen as opposed to being obsessed with the seen. I don't know. Does that answer your question? Kind of went a little roundabout way there.
No, that was really good.
Chris, you reminded me of an example one time we saw at the think tank event for authorized practitioners, where we had one of our Canadian colleagues show an example of his very first policy. And at the time, there wasn't really PUAs available. I think there might have been like 15% PUA room available, paid up additions. That means 85% of his premiums were going to the base premium, and he had 15% of his premiums going to the paid up rider. And he showed the long-term outlay of that example. And if anybody would have seen it, it would have blown their minds. And according to mass marketing, when it comes to IBC, it was set up the wrong way, but it still worked. And I'm going back to your point of, this is way more simple than you realize. You don't have to get caught up in all the noise, as Nelson liked to talk about. When it comes to understanding banking, you don't have to understand banking at a very complex level. The simplicity of what you can do with your policy, being able to just see the numbers going up. I haven't tracked rates of return on a single policy that I own because all I know is that it just keeps going up, and I'm good with that. Like, as long as the number keeps growing, I'm okay with that because I have certainty. Every day I wake up, it's there. I have access to it. I have control of it. It's liquid, all those things, and it's doing multiple jobs for me because not only am I satisfying the need for protection through the death benefit, but I also have the ability to put it to work in other assets whenever I get ready. So positioning myself in a place where I'm prepared for either an opportunity or an emergency brings back this level of peace of mind that makes it very simple. Like, you don't have to know everything about it to understand that if you can bring peace of mind back to your side of the table, that simplifies a lot of things when it comes to our money.
100%, 100%. I think about, you asked me earlier about the transition or kind of my journey, my IBC journey, going from kind of engineering mindset, really thinking about the numbers, to like where I am now, which is basically like, if somebody says, well, what's the internal rate of return? My response is, I don't care. Well, what's the interest rate that the insurance company charges? I don't care. There are all these questions that come up. What are the fees associated with starting a policy? I don't care, y'all. It does not matter. That is majoring in the minors. The power and the reason is that, and this is what I was thinking about as you're describing that, Nate, is that all of those questions are what people ask about their 10% savings rate. And that's going to sound a little bit unclear, but Nelson, if you haven't read the book, go out and buy Becoming Your Own Banker, read it. It's going to change your life. If you've read the book, go reread it and think a little bit about this, where Nelson talks about the fact that, I think he describes it like the water cooler conversation with the average young man. If you were to get these folks around the water cooler and they're going to talk about their 1 or 2% extra, return on the maybe 10% savings. I think we're down probably like 2.5%, 3% right now in America. So those types of conversations, internal rate of return, the fees, the interest rate, all that sort of thing. Those are the types of questions and conversations we have in the mainstream paradigm of, well, what kind of return are you getting on your measly little savings? When IBC is about that 35% you mentioned, Brandon, all of that unseen money that's just leaking out of our lives. And when you figure out that you can recapture a gigantic portion of that, trust me, you are not going to care if the insurance company is charging you 3.5% or 7%. It doesn't matter. You're going to be stoked to pay more than that and to get as much money as you can into your policies. I guarantee it.
Yeah, CW, you just brought home a great reminder of something that I haven't said or conversated about in a while, where Nelson talks about the characters into play. And what we don't realize is that the rules have been created to make us think we can only be one character or the other in the process of money or energy, whatever analogy you want to use, moving. And that is by design. That is not guessing. That is certain. So then once we know these rules by design, then we get to start deciding. And these are the questions we have so much fun asking genuinely because we've gone through this process. Once we know the rules of the game, we then are brought to the precipice of this reality of, do I want to be in the game that someone else created? Or do I want to begin to play the game where I know I'll win, then I play the way I want to? And one of the simple ways to do that, CW, if I could have asked you years ago when you wouldn't leave us alone, like, hey, what about this? What about that? All the things we love about our relationship now. If I'd have said this, say, CW, stop. Let me ask you this question. Do you agree you are your greatest asset to your family and those you love and the things that matter to you most? No doubt you would have said, yes, I'm pretty certain. I believe that because I know you. I know the value you bring to the family, how you learn. So then if I would have asked you, do you know for sure that your income will continue to your family, whether you're here or not? I have yet to meet someone to say, yes, I know for sure my entire income that I currently create will continue whether I am able-bodied, disabled-bodied, or no longer here. So when we start framing the questions around the truth, we hadn't even mentioned whole life. That just ends up being the solution to the problem we now know we have that we want to solve, that's directly connected to protecting our max potential for the rest of our life. I wish I would have had those questions when we started, because that probably leads to a whole nother set of conversations because you are inclined to think about how you think. That's what you love about Nelson's message.
Yeah.
So
No,
I think that's important.
no, absolutely. One thing it makes me think of though is that if you had asked me 4 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever we met, would you agree that you are your greatest asset? I would have said yes, but not for the reasons you'd think. And what I mean by that is that I think it's very easy, at least for me, I can only talk about my personal experience. It's very easy for me to get to the place of, well, of course I'm the greatest asset to me and my family because of the inherent value that's been given to me by God. And that there's an asset in terms of what you mean to your family and to your community and the organizations you're involved in, your church, whatever it is. But the literal fact of what you're expected to earn over your lifetime, and that in itself has value and can be quantified. I would never have gotten there, because it's not how we're trained to think. What we can produce or expect to produce over our lifetime, I can't ever really think of a time in which that was covered in a class, an economics course, or anything like that. It's always about the external, the products you can create, the labor that you can contribute to an effort, but not what's inherent in you by what you can provide, if that makes any sense. So I think that would be the difference for me, is that if you had asked me, I'd be like, well, yeah, I think my kids like me. It's important that I'm around. But in terms of like, well, no. What value do you provide to the family now? And are they relying on for the rest of your natural life? What does that look like?
C-Dub, I love that framing because when we ask thought-provoking questions, it invites people, you, me, anybody else, to decide where they are currently and if or what they want to do about it. No person that Nate and I or you hang out with would ever say, yeah, I hope that my family struggles if I'm no longer on this earth tomorrow. Not one. And if they do say that, then Nate and I know immediately they are not the ideal person we want to be hanging out with, and we can get off the call or the conversation quickly. So then when you begin to ask those thought-provoking questions, you invite people to engage in about how they think about how they think, which is what I think makes Nelson's key principles so invaluable, because they're relevant no matter what we are doing. Family, faith, friendships, fellowship, businesses, tough life lessons, any of it, they all really work. And I believe it's because Nelson wanted everybody to know who Jesus Christ was before he was even worried about knowing about IBC, because those are foundational truths that come straight from the Word of God. Think, capitalize. Are you really diving into how you think? All these things that God's given us the ability to do. So, Nate, I'm going to let you, if you have one other thought or question that you want to touch on, or you want to let C-Dub say anything that's on his mind to tie it up, let me know.
The thing that I was thinking about is how blessed we are to be able to connect with and work with people who are so aligned with our mission, with our values, more importantly, like with our purpose. When we have the ability to come alongside someone and ask the questions that nobody else is asking, we have the ability to make sure that people are walking in their purpose. Sometimes we ask questions and people find out that there's things that they want that they just didn't even know they wanted because nobody's ever asked them. C-Dub, when it comes to people that we love, people that we are aligned with, man, you're at the very top of that list. We're just grateful for you, brother. Just know that I don't believe we would be where we're at if it wasn't for our relationship. So you've helped us in a lot of different ways, and it's been a very fun and exciting journey so far. Just looking forward to the future.
I so appreciate that, brother. So grateful to have found you guys, to, I don't know, brag on you two a little bit, if I may. For your listeners, like these guys have alluded to a couple of times of me bothering them, me getting involved with ULC. And the reason is that when I first learned about IBC, I got really obsessed with what the concept is and what it could do for my family. The reason that I kept bugging Brandon and Nate to help them in any way that I could was for a couple of reasons. One was because I believed in IBC, and I thought I still believe it can be an incredibly powerful tool. But the gigantic reason why I wanted to connect with Brandon and Nate was because of who Brandon and Nate are, who you two are. You know, you mentioned being able to walk alongside people and ask them questions that are going to reveal their purpose and have them, you know, lean into their passions, lean into their abilities. It is so rare to meet people who are truly invested, truly, like down to the spiritual level, almost like truly invested in someone else's success and is asking questions out of a genuine love for another person. And that's the way that you guys have approached everything. And it's, you know, I appreciate you saying that, you know, I've had some small contribution to your success, but the reality is, like, I cannot even truly enumerate all the things that I've learned from both of you and the ways in which the two of you have changed my life. Oh, and yeah, by the way, IBC's been great too. I love you guys. So grateful for you. You know, it's been such a blessing to watch what you've contributed to this world. And I can't wait to see it grow even further.
So I will just say this, obviously in 2019/2020, a ripple was created in your life, and it was because you connected with us. Not to put anything on us, but I think somebody out there right now is ready for that ripple effect. And so this could be the moment, as you're listening right now, this could be the moment that could change your life. So press into it, reach out to us. We're glad to help you.